What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop live stream for round one of the Baycurrent Classic. Brand new event on the schedule, brand new golf course as well. And we got another week of PGA DFS to attack, GPPs with our names on it, just waiting to be taken down. And on the prop of the betting side of things, some units waiting to be added to the bankroll. So here in this video, I'm going to get you ready for all of your exposure this week. With any questions that you've got in the chat, any player deep dives that you're looking me to go through, some strategy notes, a weather report, also some round one betting exposure that I've already entered to get you started for this week. But other than that, it's a little bit of an earlier live stream than usual, 3 p.m. Eastern time, because the lock is at 5:45. So a PSA there, make sure to get your lineups in time. But yeah, you've got the afternoon crew this time. I think that's a first. Usually it's either the late night crew or the morning crew with their early morning coffee. But welcome on in wherever you guys are. Maybe you're at work, taking some time off, or maybe you're already at home. Cheers to you out there. We're sipping on some water. We got Daniel with a question about Morikawa. We'll talk about him later. We got Steven there, says good morning, good afternoon, you mother fathers. Love that. And yeah, we're going to do that later, Daniel. We'll go through questions towards the middle to the later half of this live stream, but not quite right off the bat. We're first off going to focus on the golf course and the slate at hand. So the golf course is Yokohama Country Club. And if you guys haven't already seen my breakdown of it, it looks like a golf course with quite a bit of trouble on it. They've got spots that are essentially playing as out of bounds, deep wooded areas where your ball's almost for sure going to be lost. That on top of typhoon-like winds for round number one are, I think, going to lead to some pretty nasty scoring today. So if you're here for the underdog and the price picks props, we are going to touch on that towards the very second half of the stream, but a lot of fades from that perspective. And I think there's a chance they end up like not even playing round number one because of the fact that the weather's so nasty. But in general, this golf course is, at least in my opinion, more positional than it is about the power. A lot of those big numbers when you miss the fairways are the main reasoning for that. It's also not overly long. It's only 7,300 yards, a lot of elevation change downhill on the tee boxes at this course as well, which makes it play a little bit shorter than that scorecard yardage. But the main thing to note, and I think what most people are tuning into this live stream for, would probably be this Thursday weather, which there is a literal typhoon off the coast of Japan right now. So they're calling for some rain, already gone some rain at the golf course. They moved up tee times to account for that as well. That's why it's no longer locking at 7:45. Now it's at 5:45 Eastern time when we're getting that locked. It's to try and get all of this play in. And I would imagine that there's going to be at least one stoppage of play, because though the forecast here is only calling for some rain early in the day, it's supposed to be kind of sporadic, come in spurts throughout the first 3 to 4 hours of play. And if it's super heavy rain and 30, 40 mile an hour winds, they're not going to be out there. And in fact, they might not even play at all out there for Thursday. So though I do think that fades for props when we get to that perspective on the second half does make sense, there is some inherent risk if they go out there and delay play. There's a chance that they don't pick it up until we get to Friday, which would completely flip the slate on its head, because when we go to Friday's forecast, it looks completely calm. You're talking about sub 6 to 5 miles an hour of sustained wind the entire day, wind gusts that are closer to 14 miles an hour. And for the DFS perspective, it is worth noting as well that we only have 78 players in the field, and they are doing threesomes off of both tees. So any sort of weather edge over Thursday and Friday pretty much gets thrown off right there. You don't have enough of a spread of tee times for there to be a really big edge over the first 2 days, especially because it looks pretty even over the first 2 days as well from a forecast perspective. But for showdown, for rounds 2 through 4 in particular, if there is going to be a micro wedge with that weather, that is something that we can lean into for a single day of action. So at least for my main slate lineups, when we have a no-cut event like this, I'm personally never going to be playing the weather too much, but especially when we have so many unknowns with this typhoon forecast. I mean, everyone's going to have to deal with it if they go out there and play today. If they call it off, then everyone, or at least most of the field, is going to be able to avoid that for their first round of exposure. So that's what we got from the weather. We're going to circle back to this when we get to the prop section a little bit later on. But what I really want to focus on for DFS this weekend, it's always the case with these fall series events, guys, is game theory, making sure that we're getting enough differentiation into our lineups, because that is the number one edge that we have this time of year. Using modeling, using all of your stat models is going to help you break some ties. It's always something that we lean into with our process around here. But whenever we don't have a big sample size, these guys aren't playing every single week. Some of them have had 2 to even 4 to 5 weeks off since their last time on tour. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of variance, and it is extremely unpredictable when we get to this time of year. So when we see some of these high ownership numbers, guys getting a lot more steam than the players around them, in a lot of cases, that is not deserved. It is not warranted on I would say like 80 to 90% of the chalky pieces on this kind of slate. The real question is where you're going to win and lose your money this week is trying to figure out what pieces of chalk are worthy of taking, because there are going to be 1 to 2, maybe 3 pieces of chalk by the end of the week that end up finishing in that top 10 to top 15. And you're likely going to have those guys if you want to take down something big. So that's where we're going to spend our time, at least on this kind of a slate, is all the ownership from 8K plus and talking about who's getting the ownership towards the top end of the board and perhaps who's worthy of getting that ownership at the same time. So first and foremost, we got Xander Schauffele at $11,000. He is 29.5% projected owned, obviously getting quite a bit of steam from the masses as the clear number one player in this field. And though he didn't really do anything flashy in 2025, towards the latter half of the year, his second half of the season, he started gaining about a stroke to a stroke and a half every single week. So we got back to that consistent Xander Schauffele that he's really known for. Last 24 rounds will show you that with the shots gained metrics, gaining in particular with the ball striking stats over 0.3 strokes per round in both categories. Last 12 measured rounds, so if we zoom in a little bit more, it's a lot of the same, about a third of a stroke per round in the ball striking categories, losing a little bit with the short game. And the one category that he really couldn't flip at any point so far this year is the putter. I mean, the off the tee started cold, but he got that hot by mid-year. Approach play started hot, and really he's continued that all of 2025. Around the green has come and gone. That's not really a big concern for me, but that putter has been 0.3 to 0.4 strokes into the negative and pretty much the entire season. So he's going to have to figure that out. These pure bent grass greens are not his favorite surface on tour. He's a little bit better on Bermuda grass and on POA, but it's a different type of bent grass than what these players are mostly used to, and they're so pure over there. I mean, everyone always raves about the conditioning of these Japanese golf courses when the PGA Tour goes over there every single year. I don't know if we can even call it bent grass because it plays smoother than bent grass. It's some of the best agronomy that you see on the entire world, the entire schedule. That includes Augusta National. These greens over here are comparable to what you get at Augusta, and Xander Schauffele has had a lot of success on those Augusta National greens. So there's some undulation on them this week. I'm not saying that they're going to be running as quickly as Augusta. I'm certainly not in round number 1 when we have this typhoon forecast. They'll probably be running the greens closer to 10 and a half on the stimp meter so that the course doesn't get unplayable and out of hand. But I like all of that for Xander for rounds 2 through 4. So 29.5%, you could say that it's warranted. These guys below him, though, are really just getting ownership because of where they are. Hideki Matsuyama's got the hometown narrative, so that's why I've got him a hair higher owned than a Colin Morikawa. But Morikawa's not been playing good golf. You can see over here towards the right, number 58 with recent form ranking, number 52 on a Morikawa. Even got her up after his win and that high towards overseas. He didn't play as well when he got back over to stateside. Really showed that during the playoff swing and the few events that he played in between there. $9,900. $10,300, $10,400 for Hideki Matsuyama, and still 16 to 22% ownership is, in my opinion, inefficient. I don't think that all these players should be in your player pool. I would say that of these top 4 to 5 players, you should be fading at least 2, maybe even 3 of them in your lineups because they're not all solid plays. Some of them are sketchy, especially with that form up top. And with that ownership on them, right, it's not like they're like 5 to 10% owned. There's clear spots where you can get different compared to the rest of the field. So up top, I'm picking my guys. Of this top 5 players, I'm playing 3 of them and I'm fading 2 of them as well. And you obviously know I'm playing Siwoo Kim, so that's why I didn't include him in those top 5 because you obviously know the decision on him. I'm playing him at 22 to 1 to win this thing. He's one of my core plays as well. But towards the top end of the board, it's a week where you play your guys, in my opinion. And it doesn't have to be the same guys as me. Obviously, if you're on my Patreon page, you have access to these spreadsheets that are completely uncensored. You know who my quote-unquote guys are towards the top end of the board. But realistically, as long as you have a process for getting onto your plays this week, I don't think there's anyone that you're making a drastic mistake with. And really, and I'm just going to talk about it now because I'm remembering it and I want to make sure that this is brought up. There's only one player this week that I think if you play, you are making 100% a mistake using. And that would be Billy Horschel. And I love Billy Ho. He's one of my favorite players in the world. But if you guys don't know the situation around Billy Horschel right now, he's injured. He had hip surgery 4 to 5 months ago. He did come back and try and play the BMW PGA Championship. That was an event that he had won the year prior, and that was his first event back, which I would say that he was probably rushing himself back to be the defending champion there. There's a lot of incentive. He has a lot of stuff to do that week with his sponsor obligations. So he obviously wasn't 100% healthy, and he missed the cut by a whole bunch. Did not look good. Now, just a couple weeks later at a golf course where we're going to get a bunch of wind round one, it's going to be soft. It's going to be playing a little bit longer than usual for at least the first couple rounds. It's not like he's missing the cut, right? We've got 4 guaranteed rounds to work with at this sort of event, but I wouldn't recommend playing him at $7,800 off that injury. At least right now, he's going to be about 5 to 7% ownership. So that's the other portion about it. If Billy Ho was 0.5% owned, if nobody was using him this week and that was actually true, then yeah, you could make an argument for sprinkling him into a couple lineups just in case, right? Or he could with players, but he's injured and he's like 5 to 7% owned. So I think that 5 to 7% that is using Billy Horschel on their lineups probably doesn't know about that aspect of his game. So that's why I'm going ahead and giving you that PSA here, so that if you're somebody that had him in your lineups and you didn't know about that going on, didn't know about the fact that this is really his first PGA Tour event since having that surgery, then yeah, at least know that. Doesn't mean that he's unplayable. Doesn't mean that you 100% have to take him out of your lineups, but I would say it would be advisable in most cases. Let's go through some more ownership on here. So got a Kurt Kitayama at $9,400. He's 20.9% owned. He's one of the highest owned, if not the highest owned player that we have on the slate, at least outside of a Xander Schauffele, Hideki Matsuyama range. We've also got a Rasmus Højgaard getting some ownership after his top 5, top 10 finish last week. Made a whole bunch of birdies. He's 17% owned, and I don't think it's as good of a course fit, so I'm personally going to be staying away from that. Michael Thorbjornsen is 15.8% owned, also a little bit chalkier than some of the other players around him. Max Homa coming in with some pretty good form as well is also getting that steam. I point out these chalky players, and we'll say Higo at 13.2%. That's a little bit higher than some of the guys around him. I don't point out all of these guys as players that you 100% have to fade. In fact, of those players that we just pointed out, I'm using at least 2 of them in my lineups. Well, I'm fading the other 2 to 3 that we also pointed out at that super high ownership. But it is something that you have to be considering when you're going out there and building your player pool. You can't be on all the chalk. And if you have a lot of chalk in your player pool when you're going to build lineups, then you're going to have pieces to offset that chalk alongside them. And whether that's on your large field GPP optimizer with setting a product ownership cap or setting a cumulative ownership cap, depending on the optimizer that you have access to, one of those 2 ways is a way to force in differentiation. You can do that if you're hand building, just making sure that you're forcing in 1 to 2 sub 5% on plays into all the laps that you're posting into the large field GPPs. It's just a part of the process, right? It's not the end all be all. Chalk isn't always necessarily a bad thing. And I already mentioned Xander, as you could probably tell somebody I'm using despite that kind of ownership. I mean, Siwoo Kim's not low owned at 17% either, but like to give you guys an idea, let me see who was a piece of chalk in this range that I'm using. A Kurt Kitayama at 20.9%. Like, at a certain point, sometimes these guys are just too good of plays to pass up. And, for me, Kurt Kitayama was one of those guys this week. So there can be pieces of chalk that you're using towards the top end of the board. And I'd say especially with the guys that are 8K plus, these are your best players that you have in the field. If there's going to be anyone that you're using at inflated ownership numbers, make it an actual stud. Make it somebody that's got a legit chance to win this event or top 3, top 5 equity compared to some of the other players around them. Don't make it some bum-ass player down here in the 6 or 7K range that absolutely sucks, that is hardly even a PGA Tour caliber player that you're using in like 35 to 40% of your lineups. I mean, that's about as dumb a decision as you could possibly make towards the bottom end of the board. So the ownership really matters the further down the board that we go. Up top, it's a part of the process. It's something that you should be thinking about, in particular if you're playing some of the chalkier options towards this 9, 10K range. But as we start to approach that 6 and 7K range, it becomes a almost borderline necessity. So you can see guys like a McCarty that I pointed out on the Monday video, also an Austin Eckroat at $7,500. They're getting some ownership, partially because of my content. I'm sure that has at least some to do with what we're seeing on those 2 players, but they're at least sub 10%. So they're about averagely owned compared to some of the other players in this range. But what you won't see me doing with these 6 and 7K range players is using the guys that are 12 to 15, even 20% owned on a week like this. Those are almost automatic cross-off spots, and it has a lot to do with that unpredictability that we were mentioning before. It's part of the reason why up top, even some of these chalky guys in the 9-10K range are worthy of potential fade candidates is because it's an unpredictable week. We have a hard time figuring out, form over the last couple of weeks because it's not nearly as consistent as what we have during the actual PGA Tour schedule. So if you're playing these guys in the 6-7K range thinking that they're for sure going to come through for you, then, I have news for you, right? That's probably not going to be the case. And I'm bringing up my other spreadsheet, the version that's uncensored, so I can kind of point out some of that 7K chalk. And just to take a look at that and point out a few of them. In the 6K range, there are a few players garnering some ownership. Kevin Roy is about 8%. A Mac Meissner, he's $7,100. He's about 10% owned towards the bottom end of the 7K range. And Eric Cole, same thing. He's a little bit over 9% projected owned towards the bottom end of that 7K range. Who else? Nikolai Højgaard, a Patrick Fishburne is getting some ownership. A Vince Whaley and Emiliano Grillo, I've got it close to 12%. He's $8,100. So I guess you guys saw that one there before. But of all those guys I've mentioned, only one of them is in my player pool. Only one of those chalky guys that is going to be significantly higher owned than the other players around them. So unlike the top where it's like a 50-50 split, right? I'll have like half the chalk in my lineups. I'm fading the other half. Bottom end of the board, it's like 80-90% of the chalk that I'm fading and I'm not using in my lineup. So that's how your thought process should, at least in my opinion, should change as you go down in the pricing, because these guys up top are more worthy of being those chalky players. And every once in a blue moon, I will mention this because it's a generalization, right? It's not like you do this every single time with every single player. Every once in a blue moon, there will be a guy who's mispriced by like $2,000. It doesn't happen on DraftKings very often anymore, but it used to happen all the time on DraftKings where like there would be a guy who's like $6,600 who should be like $8,000. If that's the case, then maybe there is somebody down low. You should be 10 to 15% owned. That's in that, lower 7K range or top end of the 6K range. But unless it's that, then that guy should not be getting that kind of ownership. They should not be 5 to 10. In that case, when they're like 15% owned, they should not be 25 to 50 times the ownership of the guys around them, because that's what happens when you're $6,600 and you're even just 15% owned, and there are guys around you that are 0.2 to 0.3% owned. It's like 50 to 100x difference from player to player. There's nothing that can substantiate that. There's nothing that can make that make sense, right? Where somebody would have 100 times the actual optimal rate as guys around them, especially when these are all PGA Tour players. Heck, even the difference between the scrubs in the 6K range and then your 9-10K players in terms of top 10 equity is not like a 10 to, I'd say maybe it's a 10x difference, but it's not like a 50x difference from those players at the top to the players at the very bottom. It's a much finer margin than most people realize on a sport like golf. So that's why game theory matters so much. That's why having projections like these, especially for the entire field, is so useful. So like I mentioned before, these are from my Patreon. If you guys want access to all the projections for the entire field, you guys can find those via my Patreon membership. A Golf DFS tier is how you get access to everything that you're seeing right here. It's got my entire player pool on it. Also all the projections for the field, whether it's points or ownership, to help you out with those game theory decisions, and all of the research tools that we're about to use for these deep dives. So I know we had the question about Morikawa from before, but we've got recent form on here, event history, last 24, last 12 measured rounds to go through. So if you guys have any player pool deep dives that you're looking from me, feel free to go ahead and let me know in the chat. But all of that available via my Patreon membership. So feel free to check that out if you guys haven't already. Link in the description to go out there and join. And it's only $15 a month for all the projections that I do for golf, which is peanuts compared to the other websites out there. They'll cost you $50 to even a couple $100 a month just for the golf content. And I cover it for main slate for every single fall series event. It doesn't have to be a major or a Masters, right? For me to do content, I do it for all these events, that for all the sweaty tryhards this time of year. Also for Showdown for rounds 2 through 4. So check it out if you guys haven't already. And let's see what kind of questions we've got before moving on to the prop side, which I've got some hot takes for round 1, but I'm a little bit scared by that forecast too. So let's see. So you're looking for Morikawa, and you're wondering whether you'd be crazy to use him or not this week. So Morikawa's been doing it in a very on-brand fashion. Last 12 measured rounds, gaining off the tee, gaining on approach, and then the short game is about 0.8 to 0.9 shots lost. Over the last 24 measured rounds, it's a lot of the same. Gaining in the 2 ball striking categories, a little bit over 0.6 strokes per round. And then the short game categories losing a little bit under a stroke per round between the around the green and the putting. So he's giving away anything positive that he's doing with the ball striking on and then around those green complexes, which is a huge issue. but that's kind of who he is. He's a very streaky player with that short game. I don't think you'd be crazy for using him this week or for staying away, because I would argue with that kind of form that he should not be 20% owned. Like, that is way, I mean, realistically, if I was setting an ownership number for the field on Morikawa with this kind of form, it'd probably be like 14, maybe 15%. Him getting close to this 19, 20% mark feels like he's getting way more steam than he probably should. However, it's still Morikawa, who's won in Japan before. He won the Zozo Championship at Narashino Country Club. This is a different golf course, but Narashino Country Club, if you guys haven't seen my modeling or the course breakdown this week, that is my number one comp course. You can see down here, I'm using it in my modeling at about a 5% weighting. So it's only 5% of my modeling. It's not like it's enough to overtake his form being pretty shitty, but it is still something that could still something to consider in the back of your mind. So that's the Collin Morikawa deep dive. The ball striking's been there. He's obviously just got to turn it around with the short game. Hasn't shown us that much hope in those two categories, but he's done it in the past. Like, especially when he was newer to the tour, he was always gaining off the tee on approach. I mean, like clockwork. He was one of the best, most consistent players in those two categories that we'd see. And then once every month or so, he would gain like 2 to 3 strokes putting that week, and he would either contend to win or win that week. And it feels like he's lost that winning edge, right? He's maybe not as volatile with those short game categories, but he's better in the short game categories. And I'm okay doing this little bit of a rant on Collin because it's so much of a conundrum to me. He's a better player now. And I guess this 24-round sample size isn't the greatest example of that because he is losing over that 24-round sample size. But if you take a look at his shots gained total over the last couple years, and you compare it to when he was winning majors, even when he was winning just regular tour events, when he was newer to the PGA Tour, he's gaining on average more strokes per round now than what he was when he was in his quote-unquote prime, but he's winning infinitely less. It is like I said, it's head scratching. It doesn't really make any sense that Collin Morikawa would have that happen with his results. So I think there's upside there, but he's also a bit overrated at that 20% mark. So a little bit of an extended answer, but I don't really know what's going on with him. He's definitely got the potential, just not putting it all together. Let's do a deep dive on Kurt Kitayama. And by the way, Brandon, we did talk about the weather earlier. So if you want to get a deep dive on that, go back to about the 2 or 3 minute mark and we'll have all the information for you there. But yeah, we went over it for like 5 or 6 minutes. So it'd be kind of silly to go over it again. Jose does ask about Kurt Kitayama, though, who he had the win a few months ago. So obviously is playing at another level over the last couple months. Over the 24-round sample size, one of the best ball strikers that we have in the field. In fact, gaining 1.6 shots gained per round over that kind of a sample. And then over the last 12-round sample size, so zooming in a little bit further, it starts to fall off, right? He had a few down performances his last couple times playing. Missed cut will do that to you. It'll take you from gaining what was 1.7 shots gained per round down to only 0.9 shots per round, but it's still better form than a lot of the other players around him. So he's somebody that I grade out well. I project well this week. Like in terms of just the raw point projection, he's got one of the best projections of anyone in the field, let alone this 9K range. He's got projections up there with like a Xander, a Hideki, a Collin Morikawa in terms of raw points. And the fact that he's $9,400 in DFS is, I think, an absolute steal. Now, it has to be noted that I am worried about the driving accuracy, but in the past, Kurt Kitayama has had spike driving accuracy weeks, and that's when he contends. It's either when he has that kind of an off the tee week at a really hard off the tee course, or if he has a spike putting week, that'll sometimes put Kurt Kitayama into contention as well. If he does both of those, if he hits fairways and he putts well, he's probably winning that week because he is an unbelievable iron player, one of the best iron players in the world, let alone who we have playing in this kind of a field. And he's super long off the tee. So when he has a spike accuracy week, why that matters so much, because he hits the ball 320 through the air. And if he's hitting 80, 90% of his fairways, he's going to have wedge into holes where other players have mid to long irons. So he's always live in large hole GPPs. The unfortunate part is, and we mentioned it earlier, is that everyone else loves him too. So it's a double-edged sword. He makes a lot of sense. He should have that kind of ownership, but you're paying for it in the large field contest. Let's see. He said, Konnichiwa, Master Luke. Konnichiwa. That's probably all of the Japanese that I know myself, but I do love myself some Japanese food. And I want to get over there at some point. This is a random 20-second aside, but on my bucket list of places to visit, Japan's probably in the top 3. I've heard the food there is amazing. They have some great golf courses, of course, and a lot of pop culture stuff to do there as well. So I'll probably make my way at some point during my life. What's going on? Goku says, Luke, welcome on in. He said, am I seeing any sort of edge on the tee times, and is it enough to impact my exposure? So nah, I talked about this a little bit earlier. It's kind of what I was saying with Brandon. There's nothing with the weather. There's only 78 players. It's 3 sums off of both tees, and it looks flat to me. Like, it just looks nasty the entire day Thursday, and then all of Friday looks flat. So even if they delay play, it's going to be the same for everyone, it looks like. So yeah, nothing in my exposure. He said, could I also deep dive Sam Stevens, Smalley, and Ann? For sure. So let's do Sam Stevens first. His issue is just the irons. He can't hit an iron for his life, but the other 3 categories are pretty decent for him. So over that last 24-round sample size, gaining off the tee, gaining around the green, he's about a neutral with the putter. But like I mentioned, the guy can't hit an iron. He's losing like 0.6 strokes per round over that sample. And then the last 12-round sample size, it is even worse. He's losing 1.29 shots gained approach per round. Can we get him an iron coach? Can we get him with like Cuomo or something? One of those guys who's known for turning around iron play in a couple weeks? Because if he could do that, the rest of the game is at least competitive. Putter could be hot and cold, really been cold over the last couple starts, as you can see, losing 0.7 strokes per round. Stevens, though, is a wide range of outcomes player. He's not my favorite option this week. He's not really my cup of tea, really, in any sort of format. But if you were going to use him, it'd be in large field GPPs, because the byproduct of having that wide range of outcomes, missed cut equity, finishing in last equity, is the other side of that is that when you play well, you also have a lot of top 10 or top 15 equity. So, in GPPs, he could conceivably get there in that kind of format, and he'll be unowned. I mean, at $7,300, he's one of the few guys here that's going to be truly sub 5% ownership. You've got guys like Takumi Kanaya around him with the pricing that are going to be like 10% owned. He's a leverage option for sure. So he's not my favorite play. That's the deep dive on him. And let's do Alex Smalley next. So also a high upside player, but he's been playing terrible golf over the last couple starts. Last time out, he missed the cut, which ended up burning me on some of my lineups. But let's see, over the last 24 rounds, he's gaining off the tee and losing everywhere else. Yeah, he's, like I said, he's not playing his best golf. Let's go to the last 12 rounds, gaining off the tee and then losing everywhere else. The gaining off the tee is great. He's long and straight. He's one of the best off the tee players in the world. That's kind of the Alex Smalley experience. That's what you're getting when you're using him, which at a course like the Farmers Insurance Open, Torrey Pines, courses where you can gain 4 to 5 strokes over the entire event off the tee, can be really useful. This week, though, it's more about the accuracy. You don't really have to be a bomber to find that success. I'd probably rate an Alex Smalley at like a 5 out of 10. The course fit is a 3.5 out of 10. So that aspect is not good. I don't think it's a great golf course for Alex Smalley's game. However, the reason why he's still a 5 out of 10 is because when he plays well, he really plays well, and he makes a whole lot of birdies and he snowballs when he plays good golf. So for me, this is like a great showdown week for Alex Smalley. Like, you use him in that 18-hole sample size. You hope you get that positive momentum going for a small sample size. But at a golf course like this with all the trouble off the tee, I worry that at some point he's going to hit a ball out of bounds. And if you didn't see my course breakdown earlier this week, all of the areas on this golf course are technically inbounds. There is no out of bounds, and there's not many penalty areas. There's a couple lakes, which are penalty areas, but the dense wooded areas, the really heavy bushes, which this golf course is known for, which when you're watching the broadcast, you're going to be like, holy shit, why didn't my tells tell me about this? You heard it from me. You'll be asking about some of the other people, like, why wasn't this a bigger part of your process? It is so damn tight out there if you're missing just a little bit offline. That's what I worry about with Smalley, is that he could have 8 or a 9 or a 10 on a hole this week. And if he does that, there's no cut. So he's going to be playing for all 4 rounds, but it's going to take him from having any placement point potential to having absolutely 0. So the no cut format helps him, but that's about it. The no cut does help Alex Smalley. That's the one real positive there. And let's go through Benny Ann, Benny Ann had been playing terrible, terrible golf for the longest time this year. He had really fallen off, wasn't playing anywhere near his baseline, but over the last 24 and last 12 measured rounds, it started to come along a little bit. So last 24 round baseline is a neutral with the ball striking, gaining off the tee, and then giving away all of it with the approach play. He's got to be better with the irons. We know that. But the short game stats, and yeah, I guess the last 24 rounds, you're starting to see some of those negatives still in there. But let's say you're the last 12. So if we zoom in a little bit more, he's now gaining with the putter. That is an extremely positive sign. He's still losing with the iron play, but he's gaining in 3 of the 4 categories. So I think we're starting to see the breadcrumbs of Benny Ann coming into some form. And Benny Ann, if he was in form in this kind of a field, would be like 85 to 9 grand. He's a winner, guys that get into contention. He's somebody that's a President's Cupper, one of the better President's Cuppers when they last played as well. I'm not sleeping on him this week. He's not the best course fit, in my opinion. He does spray it a bit off the tee, but if he can have a spike week from that perspective, has the upside to get there. Thoughts on a Hunjae Im this week? Yeah, I like Hunjae, the nickname on our guy Sungbae. I call him Sungbae, but you can go a lot of different ways with that nickname, of course. I'd say at $8,300, he's number 69 in recent form ranking. He's losing over a stroke per round. You're betting on the long-term talent level if you're using Sungjae at this point. Now, during the 2025 season, I chose to do so quite often, and I got burned by it time and time again. The best spot to do it, though, and maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I'm playing him this week, but because it feels like now that there's been a couple weeks off, he wasn't really a fixture in the playoffs like he normally is. Now he might be a little bit better that he's had some time to work on his game. Like, he hasn't been playing every single week. He's not like he's been on the Asian tour every week or DP World Tour playing. Like, he has taken some time away, probably working with a coach. Or I would hope so. I hope he's not chasing pussy or something and doing that rather than actually working on his profession. If he has been, I hate that I used that term with Sunday, but it's true. Some of these guys, rather than working on the games, they chase pussy and they do this dumb shit. They could be great. They could be chasing greatness, legacy, generational wealth for the rest of their lives. But some of these dumbasses get into this position and completely throw away all of that talent. I feel like Sanjay is not that sort of guy. So if Sanjay is locked in, if he's trying to actually get back to what he was before, then this could conceivably be a great spot for it because he's extremely accurate off the tee. If he had any kind of form at all, he would be a 10K golfer in this field. He'd be one of the top 5 betting odds in this field. If this was a year and a half ago, this is a year and a half ago, and he was $8,300 in this field, he would be 80% owned. Like, literally everyone would use him at this sort of a price tag. So yeah, I think there's upside there, but we got to hope he's locked in. I'm worried about that with some of these guys. It's they're human. So some of them, you might not think that that's like stuff that happens with these guys, but they do. Like, some of them are horn dogs. They're, on the Tinder swiping all day, and they're not working on their game. They're working on some other strokes rather than their round strokes for golf. Any feeling on using Eric Cole this week? I love Eric Cole because he's a grinder. So I'm worried about some of the American guys and like jet lag coming over from America, then happen to play in Japan. Not with Eric Cole. That guy wakes up. He could be tired. He could probably wake up at 2 a.m. and play a round of golf if he could. I think he's a decent play. He's a high birdie percentage option, but he sprays it off the tee, man. His off the tee play is a real liability at this kind of a golf course. So that's personally why I'm not super high on Eric Cole this week, but I like him in general. And at least that mental aspect is at least something to throw out there because unlike some of the other players in that range, like, he's locked in. He's the exact opposite of some of these players that might get a little bit distracted. Eric Cole wakes up thinking about golf and goes to sleep thinking about golf. That's our least of our concerns. Did I cover Brian Campbell? He has the trees working for him. Oh boy, don't give me that kind of PTSD on our guy Campbell. Stolen outright from my grasp at the Mexico Open with those trees. I'm playing him this week, sites, so I guess that's really the main thing I'll say about it is that he's super cheap and he's down there with all the Asian Tour players. And every once in a while, we get one of those Asian Tour guys that like top 10s. And that might happen again this year. But the US guys that are down towards the bottom end of the board have a much, much easier chance, or much better chance, I should say, of actually getting to the optimal lineup. So yeah, I'm using some Brian Campbell because of the price disrespect. He's won multiple times this year. And at one course, especially the Mexico Open, that really did not fit his style of game. So yeah, it's for me, it's almost like just an automatic play when he's that cheap. He said Higa's a value play at $6,400. Yeah, so he might be that one, Japanese tour player that ends up going off. But I have a hard time narrowing those down. The ones that I've seen kind of steamed in some of the ownership or by some content would be him. I've seen his name, and then Onishi thrown out there because Onishi plays quite a bit. Yeah, they did move up tee times. That was 2 hours. We mentioned that one earlier. You said 1-2 of the last 4 for Higa. Okay, I didn't know that about the form. So yeah, of those like Japanese tour players, don't give me the ones that were just kind of like okay recently. Give me the ones that have won 2 of the last 4 times on tour. Like that makes a whole lot more sense. So you know what, Ernie? I'm not going to be using them because I've already set my lineups and I have everything set at this stage. But I don't think that's a bad idea at all. In fact, if you're still watching this and you're trying to find one of these Japanese tour players to use, he could potentially be in there. He says, you miss Luke talking golf. Hey, I've been talking golf all fall, so you must not be paying attention to the PGA Tour if you're saying that, Jordan. We're doing this every single week. But yeah, I get it. Football's the bigger thing this time of year. We've got baseball playoffs, basketball, all the major sports, right, are pretty much at their peak except for golf. So I get it. But we've been doing live streams every single round. So make sure to tune in for those, man. We've been live every single time. He said, you bet him and Willie Wilcox are definitely chasing some P. I bet Willie is. Willie feels like the kind of guy. I mean, he's a caddy. He doesn't have to be as locked in as these players and whatnot. But him having Willie around all that time, I don't know. Willie's reformed. Willie's a much calmer person these days, right? He's not in his partying habits anymore. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he's put down the chasing pussy. He might still be doing that. But okay, let's put together one lineup, show you the lineup construction, and then we're going to go through some prop stuff, which I honestly don't love the prop exposure for the first round. I think there might be a delay, but we still are going to go through that aspect here in just a second. But when putting it together in lineups, I don't have a big weather edge that we're attacking here. So it's mostly just game theory for me. And because of the typhoon that is off of the coast, and because it's a fall series event where we don't have that kind of form, like I'm even more so leaning into this game theory. So up top might not be my main concern in terms of getting like low owned plays in here, but let's throw in a Xander. For our second man in, let's also throw in a Siwoo Kim. So for the sake of this, I'm not going to get different towards the top end of the board, but where we are really going to focus on that game theory angle is going to be with the rest of the lineup. So I'm going to go with a Bazane Hoot who's like averagely owned in that 8K range, as opposed to a slightly chalkier option like some of the other guys around him. But in the 6 and 7K range is where it's a non-negotiable. Like I'm not playing chalk at this portion of the board. So for example, Nico Echeverria, nobody's talked him up this week. I know it was a different event, a different golf course, but Echeverria, it's my number 1 comp course for this week. He won at Narashino Country Club. He's an accurate driver. He checks a lot of the boxes that I'm looking for. So if you give me him at below average ownership, I'll take that as a slightly differentiated spot. A Kanaya, I would love to play. He's also an accurate driver. He's got the local ties and he's playing good golf. He had a top 20 finish last week, which screwed me on Sunday. I bet against him, and he went over his birdie line. So, respect there, I guess, to Kanaya. I never hold it against these guys, especially when I fade them and then they end up coming through. It's like I was the donkey for wanting to bet against them to begin with. But $7,300, we would not want to use him in a large field GPP lineup here, especially if we were chalkier towards the top end of the board, because he's going to be like 10% owned. He's one of the higher owned players that we have at this portion of the board. So if that was the case, a Benny Ann might be a better player to get to as a substitute because he's going to be lower owned. He still has the long-term same, if not a higher talent level than somebody like a Takumi Kanaya, and he's going to have that lower ownership at the same time. So if you threw that in there, and then at $6,500, there's not really a lot of chalk at this portion of the board. So pretty much no matter who you would use down here, you could get away with. But for the sake of making it a little bit more interesting with our last man in, let's go down and find a different differentiated play in the 7K range. So let's use a Lee Hodges instead, I guess at like $6,900. For your last man in here, if you're playing in the big $5 or the one, what is it, $5, the $25 GPP, the big 150 maxes that we have around the different industry, you want to make sure even with your last man in here, that you're not playing somebody that's like 10% owned. And of these guys at $7,000, there's not a whole bunch of them that are 10% owned. Like Mao's getting some ownership. I think a Mitchell's like 5 to 7%. But you might even want to consider leaving some salary on the table because there's only 78 players in the field this week. This isn't a full 156 player field. We almost have to treat this like the lineup construction for round 3 and 4 showdown, where we're a little bit more stringent about duplication risk because there's less options to choose from. And not to bore you guys with, stat talk here or anything, this isn't a stat class, but when you have more players to choose from, 156 choose 6, is an infinitely larger number than 78 choose 6. And that's how you find out the total amount of combinations that you can have in either case. It is orders of magnitude difference from going from 78 to 156. I don't even know how many orders of magnitude difference. It's 5 or 6 magnitude difference between those two different numbers. So that's why when we're playing on a slate like this, and this is for main slate, right? There's only 78 players because this is a no-cut event. Leaving salary on the table is a lot more viable and something that you should consider in those large field GPPs because your duplication risk is orders of magnitude higher than what it typically is. So that's something that I do in these sort of formats. Showdown, that is, of course, going to be the case as well for the next couple of days. That's usually not something that we do until the weekend. So that's what I would say about the lineup construction. It's pretty typical, though, just really a game theory slate because the weather with the threesomes off of both tees is really flat for the first couple of days of action. So if you have any couple of DFS questions, you can still throw those down in the chat, but that's all we got for the DFS side. Now we're going to focus on props, what we've got for the first couple of days. You're trying to find an edge on underdog and prize picks. So if you were just here for DFS and you're hopping on out of here, best of luck with everything that you guys are entering. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel because like I was saying with that one comment there, we're doing live content every single day. We've got showdown props covered for the next couple of rounds, live streams that'll be in the morning or close to midday. Not going live in the middle of the night. I will be sleeping when a lot of the play is going on. But after I wake up, I put together projections. I make a game plan for our prop exposure as well. We'll be going live for rounds 2 through 4. So subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that when it goes live. But let's go through this for round 1. So the main thing that I've got here, and it's, I guess, a little bit of a warning on this kind of a slate, is that you would think that this is very straightforward. There's 40-mile-an-hour winds. There's 20-mile-an-hour sustained winds. The local forecasts actually have it closer to 25 to 30-mile-an-hour sustained winds. You just want to fade everyone, right? I mean, that it seems pretty straightforward. But what people always forget to realize and forget to think about when we get this situation is that, do we really think they're going to play in this? My answer is no. I don't think that they're going to play through this kind of a weather. So I've entered one slip so far, and it's the slip that you guys saw on the Bet the Number blog. You've seen it if you're a part of my Patreon page that I've already entered, and I have no plans on entering anything else at this stage. I've been around this way too long for them to just hand us free fades. It never happens when the lines look too good to be true on the sports books. That they had guys at like -1.5. They had guys at 4.5 birdie lines. It's usually too good to be true. And if I was a sports book and I wanted to be sneaky about this and, it looks like it's going to end up being delayed, is I would post lines. I would let everyone go out there and just fade everything and then screw themselves. I still think entering fades right now is probably the smart decision. However, doing so irresponsibly could be a way to just shoot yourself in the foot. And, if it ends up going the other direction and they cancel play and it moves on to the next day, some of the sports books out there might have stipulations that'll refund you before the next round starts. But these pick'em sites like Prize Picks and Underdog do not have that kind of stipulation. As long as they play the next day, so tomorrow on Friday, which, by the way, the Friday weather looks perfect. They're going to be playing on Friday. There's no reason that they wouldn't be able to play then you're going to get absolutely bent over. So here is my recommendation for the Thursday slate is, if you're going to enter anything, make it one slip. Make it all fades. Hopefully play through this stuff and that you end up getting a cashed out slip, because if they play through this stuff, the stuff out there is free. The strokes lines are 2 strokes off. The birdie lines are 2 birdies, or at least a birdie and a half too high. Like, yeah, I agree with that. I think the lines are drastically off. However, there's a reason why Prize Picks took their board off. You would have noticed if you were looking at this board earlier this week that PGA on Prize Picks had strokes, it had birdie lines posted, all this kind of stuff. And I was sitting there, it was on Tuesday morning, yesterday, and I was like, I really want to nuke all these unders. And they had some like scrubs like Norn at 4.5 birdies, a whole lot of guys. And maybe it was fate that I wasn't able to enter them in time, but just as I was going to enter a big slip with a whole bunch of unders, a whole bunch of fades, they all bumped. And then about 5 minutes after that, they all got taken off the board, which tells me that Prize Picks started getting some action on some of those fades and probably got scared of it, but knows in the back of their mind that there's a chance that play doesn't even end up happening. That's why they posted those lines to begin with. So that's where we're at right now. There's a whole lot of unknown with this kind of slate. And I don't think we're going to know about a delay, because the PGA Tour is terrible about this, right? They don't really tell the plan ahead of time. They just kind of like announce the delays as soon as play is going to start. there's a chance that they don't even try to begin play today. And if that's the case, then yeah, the 2 fades that I took for the Bet the Number blog are probably going to lose. I knew that when I entered it. I know that now. It's why I'm not entering anything else on top of it. But that's what I want to throw out there, because I feel like you're going to see some people on Twitter, some other cappers that are lazier, especially this time of year with golf, right? People don't put in all the same time that they do the other time of the year. They're focusing on the MLB playoffs, NBA, all this other shit that they've got going on, NFL, that they don't put as much time into their craft. And that even happens with myself. This time of year, I've got NFL and golf going on, but luckily I don't overload myself, right? I only keep myself to my 2 sports because I know if I go past that, I won't have enough time to dedicate and to feel like I'm on top of what I'm doing like I want to be. But these other cappers out there, they don't have that same kind of guilt, and they don't have that same kind of discipline when it comes to their exposure. And if they see this kind of forecast, they're like, oh, just take all over and freeze. It might end up working out for them, or it might end up costing their subscribers their entire bankroll. Because when you see this kind of forecast and you see this kind of value, right, you'd be tempted to go like, oh, hammer the overs, put everything you have on the overs, spread it out, blah, 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 mix and match. I've actually seen a couple cappers say that for this round 1 slate. Well, you better hope that they don't stop play, because if they do, you and all your subscribers that entered all of those fades might literally be bankrupt by the time you get around to it. Because if they play on Friday after all that rain comes through and on completely calm conditions, it's going to be like a 3-shot difference in scoring average. It's going to go from playing over par at like a +1 to +1.5 average to like a -2 scoring average. So don't be that kind of a clown. Don't be that sort of a person who gets caught with their pants down. If you're going to bet on this round 1 of this golf, do so responsibly. And I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear, right? They want to get told like, oh, massive edge, go out there, hammer it, so on and so forth. That's irresponsible, and that's just not the kind of scenario that we're getting here. So let's go through a couple of those props that I've already entered. So there's a couple bumps on these, I believe, but it was a Wyndham Clark over on strokes. And then the other side of it was a Garrett Higo over on strokes. So I got these at even money. Look at this. Now they're at 0.87x. So a massive payout difference ever since I took them. And again, that was the sports book starting to adjust the lines. That was Prize Picks adjusting their lines down, right? Adjusting to some of the wind reports and weather reports that people were posting. This would only pay 2.04x at this point. And if you're somebody that's just watching this now, wasn't able to catch the Bet the Number slip before it ended up moving or anything like that, just don't enter anything for round number 1. If you want to know my best advice, and I guess I shouldn't say that because there could be other fade value on the board that would make sense. And like, for example, this bogey or worse board, I guess if I didn't have a slip in already and I was trying to enter something right now, like maybe I would fade some of these guys for an over 2.5 bogeys. I don't think that they've appropriately priced this board if they're playing through a 30 to 40 mile an hour wind. But the same thing holds. There's a reason why I'm not adding a second piece of exposure like this on top of what I already have in there, because I know the risk, what happens if there's a suspension of play. And, the other part of it is you can't play for the suspension of play either, because if you do that and then they don't suspend play, then you end up getting screwed. So there's a couple ways you could do it. You could do it the way that I am, just taking one fade slip, going with a small piece of exposure for round number 1, or you could play both sides. You go with like a 4-leg parlay of all fades, and then a 4-leg parlay of all positive stance plays. Unfortunately, these underdog and Prize Picks sites, they screw you on the correlation. So even that isn't really something that we can do for the first day. So that's why I think being prudent about it, not going overboard with your exposure, is probably the best decision to be made. We're going to look at the DP World Tour board, though. We do have that event on the other side, and it's at a golf course that we've actually seen before, so we have some averages to go through. But I do want to note that even for like the matchup and the 3-ball side for PGA guys, I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. If they're playing in 40 mile an hour winds, there's no edge to trying to bet a 50-50 matchup. And I hate to like make it like that, but it's true. The worst player can easily win when the wind is like that, right? It's about hitting the ball low. It's about getting lucky breaks, not being absolutely shafted because the 40 mile an hour wind gust takes you into a spot that's unplayable. That's going to happen for round 1 of this PGA Tour event if they play through it. You're going to have guys that are having amazing rounds, like 5-6 birdies in windy conditions, that get to a hole and make a 12, because that's the kind of golf course that they're playing, and that's how tight it is with all that wind out there. I have no interest in betting those matchups, or really that much at all, for the PGA Tour side on this kind of a slate. So again, it's not the popular thing that a lot of people want to hear, but I think it's the prudent thing. at least for the PGA side of things. But on the DP World Tour, it does not look nearly as chaotic. In fact, it looks a lot more straightforward. Here are the averages from last year, which was one of the harder years that we had at the Spanish Open. It played plus 0.19, so that's a 71.19 at the par 71 setup. Birdie average was 3.47 per round. Bogey or worse average was 3.85. So you can see there it was tougher than the average course on the DP World Tour. But historically, this course has played -1 to -1.5. So last year it was a bit windier, especially round one. Round one, it played harder than +2. Round two, I think it played a little bit over par. It was like 0.5 or something like that. But rounds 3 and 4 at this event last year played -1. So that's personally more of what I'm expecting in 2025, especially because the weather doesn't look that crappy. And let me see, do I still have it in here? I guess I don't. It's a Club de Campo, I believe. Sound like a pure gringo saying that, huh? And it's in Madrid. Let's see if we can find it on here. So, okay, this is the town at the golf course is in, just outside of Madrid. Let's put it on the 1 hour forecast. And what are we on? The ECM right now? Okay, that's probably the best forecast that we have. Sub 10 miles an hour of sustained winds for Thursday. A wind gusts that are about 20, but nothing that is too bad. And I want to look at the GFS as well. That's one of the better models that we have for these European courses. A little bit more significant on the GFS. They have it closer to 10 to 12 sustained, but the wind gusts not as significant, closer to like 10 to 15 miles an hour on this sort of a model. So yeah, compared to the averages from last year, I would say that -0.5 to a -1 scoring average feels pretty appropriate for round one. And the reason why I have it at like a -0.5 to a -1 average is because we're dealing with before the cut line. We're dealing with some of the scrub Spanish players that make it into this field. Like any home open, they let all the mid-tier to even like not even professional Spanish players end up teeing it up. So that's obviously going to impact the scoring average for the first couple of days. It's going to make it worse than it actually is in reality. But by the time we get to the weekend, assuming that it's, you know, a similar forecast, breezy but not overly breezy for rounds 3 and 4, we're probably getting closer to that -1 to -1.5 scoring average again. So that's what I'm expecting on the Spanish Open side. And then looking at this board, I didn't disagree with it too much. I thought maybe there could be some undervalue, especially in some of these like elite tier guys that they have at 69. Like a Marco Penge kind of stuck out, a Patrick Reed, a Shane Lowry as well, because at 69, that's a -2 projection. If it plays about a -1, these players on average will gain about a stroke and a half to maybe 2 strokes per round on the DP World Tour. They obviously don't do that on their respective tours like Live or the PGA side. Like Shane Lowry is closer to a half a stroke to a stroke gained on the PGA. Patrick Reed is closer to a stroke gained per round on the Live Tour, but DP World Tour is a lower level tour than both of those, right? Live is a higher level tour than the DP World Tour, and certainly the PGA side is a higher level tour than what we have on the DP World Tour. So these kind of players, we have to kind of make that adjustment for. And really, a lot of the elite tier players that you're seeing on this list, we have to make the adjustment for in this kind of a field. And at 69 strokes, giving them a stroke gain to the field, you know, they're going to average over a stroke gained in most cases. So I was looking at some unders. I wanted to wait until we got a little bit closer to lock in a better weather forecast before I went out there and committed to anything. And in fact, I probably won't be entering anything on this end right at this moment. We're probably just going to leave it to the PGA fades that we've entered for right now. But as the night goes on and as the DP World Tour, Euro Tour website will post a forecast after midnight. So we'll have to see how many more hours we have to wait, but like 3 or 4 more hours, and we'll get that DP World Tour forecast posted on their website. When we get that forecast, which happens to be the most accurate that we have to work with, I'll probably enter something for round number 1. But it's looking like some positive stance plays, maybe some unders on strokes. And then with the birdie lines, it's a par 71 setup, so they only have the 3 par 5s, which does limit some of your potential birdie production. But these guys at 4, like a James Shaper, I have a soft spot for. He's an absolute stud, young up-and-comer on the DP World Tour. Like a John Perry is a top 10 player in this kind of field, and they've got him at that 4 birdie mark. Thurston Lawrence, he's one of my favorite players that we have on the DP World Tour as well. There are a few guys I'm considering for some positive stance plays, but as I haven't entered anything quite at this stage, I don't want to give you guys just some leans that I've been considering. Make sure to check out the Patreon page for all of my actual exposure as I get to it. But I'm thinking that's all we've got here for this live stream, guys. We've gone through everything that I've really wanted to at this point. It's a bummer that we're dealing with one of those weird weather slates on the PGA side of things, but realistically, guys, just be smart about it. Be responsible with what you're entering. I hate to see some people in the industry not being responsible when we get this kind of situation. because I've had to learn from my mistakes in the past. Like I've been that, arrogance, what's the word for it? Like, I don't even know the right word for it. Like, you don't know what you don't know at that point. Like some of those people, they don't even know that they're being irresponsible, going out there and doing those sort of things. PGA Tour is crazy. Sometimes they'll call off an entire day. I mean, you saw it on the DP World Tour just this last week. They only played a 3-round event as opposed to a 4-round event because they had such bad weather there during the weekends. It's just not something that you really want to mess around with too much. So that would be my 2 cents from that side. Let's catch up on chat, see if there's any last second questions, and then we'll get this thing out of here. So where'd we leave off? You said, are there any cheap Japanese guys that really catch my eye? Nah, man. I'm not playing too many of them in my lineups this week. The ones that I'd prefer to use, Justin, are the ones that are on the PGA Tour. Ryo Hisatune, for example, a Takumi Kanaya that we've seen play to a PGA Tour level. A lot of those guys that are playing on the Japan Tour are, even if they were on the DP World Tour, they wouldn't be that good. So I'm personally just not going to take a shot in the dark on them. Every once in a while, we see one of those guys randomly show up for like a top 10 finish. But even then, they're like 0.1% owned, and you don't really have to have them in the large field GPPs because the reality is, even if you get that one player right, you still have to get the other 5 players right with them for that sort of a play to count. And a lot of the people that are using those Japan Tour players towards the very bottom are using them in like 1 to 2% of lineups. They're not even 150 max players in a lot of cases. Your 150 max players know not to use those players, right? That's why you don't see a lot of those guys being used in those kind of portfolios, but they don't even have enough lineups to make it count when they end up getting them correct. So I would stay away from those for the most part, but that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate your support of the channel as per usual. A little bit of an afternoon stream was a change of pace, but it was a nice one here with all of you guys. I hope to see a lot of your names towards the top end of those GPPs. Hope we can cash out on some of this prop exposure that we've mixed in as well. And yeah, fingers crossed for no weather delays, because weather delays does screw up our content and the showdown for rounds 2 through 4. But assuming that we're on pace and assuming that we've got a slate to attack for round 2 tomorrow night, we will be live tomorrow morning going through all of that and all the exposure for round 2. So make sure you subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that when it drops. And of course, for all the content that I'm doing, all the underdog and prize pick slip that I enter, any matchups, any of that on the sports books like Hard Rock Bet, you can find that on my Patreon page as well. The golf prop tiers, how you can get access to all of that, and for access to the spreadsheets that you saw before with my entire player pool and all of my projections and modeling for the field, you can find that on the golf DFS tier. But that's all, guys. Best of luck with everything, and I'll catch you guys there tomorrow morning.